Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to some Antics. Today I am joined by Hidde de Vries. Hidde, hello, welcome to the stream.
Hi, hello. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm super excited to have you on. Oh, we've already got someone subscribing. Thank you for the subscription, Eleventy. Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on because I've actually been reading some of your blog posts for a while. They are just some of my favorites in the accessibility space. So I'm super thrilled to be having you on. Um, for folks who might not have seen you around, would you care to give yourself an introduction?
Yeah, sure. My name is Hidde. I am joining you today from Rotterdam, the Netherlands. I have always worked as a front-end developer, and in the last 5 years of my career, I've moved towards doing accessibility, which I've kind of been doing full-time for the last few years. I've most recently worked at the World Wide Web Consortium on accessibility. Yeah, I'm excited to show you a bit about auditing websites today.
Absolutely. I sent out a tweet just a couple days ago, it feels like, that was like, hey, do you work on cool accessibility tooling and resources? I'd love to have you on the stream. You responded, and within like just a day or so, we had this booked. So I'm super excited. Let's go ahead. I'm going to start sharing my screen. I'm going to, first of all, point out a few places where folks can go find you before we get started. So here's your Twitter. I am so jealous of your three-character username. That is excellent.
Yeah, it does attract a lot of crypto spam, though.
I
Someone
believe it.
started a currency with those three characters at some point.
Oh boy, yeah. Um, that is rough. And then here's your blog. You got tons of fantastic stuff on here. Highly recommend reading it. Okay, so do you want to kind of walk us through what we're going to be doing today?
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of people talk about accessibility, especially in organizations. They'll say let's make our websites more accessible. Let's try and organize ourselves in a way that we can get our accessibility right. But often then people will get to this question like, how do we do that? What does that mean? What does it mean to have an accessible website? And many of you will be familiar with the standard, the WCAG standard, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines that exist specifically kind of for this problem. Like, how do we even measure what an accessible website is? And for me, that kind of goes into different aspects. Like, there is this standard that you can follow and measure accessibility with. There's also a bunch of best practices, and then there's also user testing that you probably should be doing with people with disabilities. So for me, it's kind of those three things. Like, there's a standard, there's best practices, and there is user testing. So together, that's accessibility. But the standard part is kind of what we'll be focusing on today. It's a standard with lots of different success criteria in it, and they are designed to be checked again. So for each of those, you can say, this one is met or this one is not met on this website, or this website does or does not meet the specific success criterion. That's what it's designed for, and that's kind of how that measuring works. So organizations will go and have an audit on their website. And basically what that means is someone will go through each of the checkpoints for a bunch of pages and then figure out if these checkpoints are met or not. And if it does, then you have a perfect score. But quite often there are a number of issues that will be in your website and that these reports will kind of help you find. I do a lot of audits myself, and I have never done an audit where it was perfect at the first time. I'm sure if I audit my own website, I will find stuff because there's always stuff, and then that's fine. But today I kind of want to take you into what auditing is and how that works, and we'll be using the official methodology that has been published kind of together with WCAG, or just after WCAG was published, and that is called wcag-em, and EM is evaluation method. So this is a long document. We'll not read it together today, I think, but it has a bunch of steps for performing a WCAG audit in a fair way and in a consistent way that can be reproduced. And yeah, we'll kind of be doing that today.
Okay. And then I guess before we start diving into these steps, when you perform an audit, who do you envision as like the end consumers of the audit? Like, who is this audit for?
That's a great question. So for me personally, it is the team that is going to fix the problems that I find.
Okay.
Is the end user that I have in my head, but that's not the same for every auditor. So, and also not for every audit. So sometimes these are used by governments to prove to other governments that they are doing a good job. An example of that is in the Netherlands, like a city will have to get a performance report and then send it to the national government so that they can show, we comply with the regulations. Or in Europe, all the member states will also have to show like our member state websites conform to these things. So these audit reports are kind of made to do a lot of proving, we're doing well, we're not doing well types of things. So it's used for that. But I personally, if I want to help an organization improve their website, I'll also just kind of use it as a QA session and just give them the information they need to fix the problems. That's not always included in accessibility audits because technically you only need to say this criterion is met or it is not met and then give an example. But usually I go into more of like, actually, if you change this attribute to that, then your problem is solved. So that, my end user of the report, a developer or designer, can just go ahead and kind of implement the fixes. Because for me, that is kind of what we're trying to do here, right? We want to make the web more accessible, not just have a theoretical exercise going.
Yeah, this isn't a tool for shaming people, right? Like, this is an actionable resource for people to like improve their site in like real ways, which I love.
Yeah, totally. I want to help you get your website right, and not shame you. It is sometimes like when I meet teams, they sometimes are like scared of the auditor. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to approve this if I change it? Are you going to be happy? And I don't think it should be that kind of relationship. An auditor should help an organization to find the problems and also help them towards solutions where possible.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I guess should we just dive into doing an audit, or is there more background you wanted to provide before we do? Like, where would you like to take this next?
One thing I can say is that there's this methodology that has 5 steps. But to really help people do this, we at the W3C has published a tool that is specifically to kind of take you through these steps so that you don't need to use the document per se. It does assume you're kind of familiar with the contents of it. But this tool really exists to kind of take you through so that you can like follow the steps and get a report that is kind of consistent. That's called wcag-em report tool. It is used by a lot of governments across the world, and with more accessibility regulations also starting to apply to businesses, not just governments. I imagine it might be used by more people than just governments in the future too.
So this is, you could probably, I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase this question. Like, you could probably come up with your own system for reporting an audit, but this is kind of a standard that is published by the same people who publish the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and it sounds like it's a standard that governments are leveraging more and more as well.
Yeah, and they do that because it helps them compare reports. So there are lots of like regulators in Europe that need to compare how well like some part of their government is doing. So this kind of tooling helps. One thing that this tool has in that regard is also a JSON export in a standardized format. So there is a JSON format that is specifically for accessibility conformance reporting. this tool will also give you that, so that there is like a way to programmatically compare
Okay.
reports too.
Gotcha. Yeah. I like the idea of like standardizing even just the way that we audit things so that like two audits are comparable, and then having like a standardized output seems really nice too. Okay.
Yeah. And it's not like the holy grail, like I mentioned before, there's user testing and best practices and all of that. It's also important. But yeah, having standardized reports with checkpoints, like the ones in WCAG, yeah, that's definitely part of like a large scale accessibility operation, like the European Union is trying to do with their regulations, and I'm sure in other parts of the world, stuff like that is happening. So yeah, do you want to do a report today?
I'd love to.
Um,
Yeah.
cool.
So we were talking ahead of time. We wanted to have a site that we could do a report on. And it's always tricky, like picking the right site to do because we don't want to come off like we're shaming any particular tool. So what we're about to do is not shaming any particular tool, but rather just leveraging a site that is very widely used and using it as just kind of a demo for stuff. So we are going to be using Wikipedia as our scope, right?
Yeah. Just thought that would be like a nice and neutral thing to look at. Our goal today is not to blame anyone or kind of look at the actual issues too much, but more like how, if we were tasked by Wikipedia to go into a report, what would the steps be? What would that look like?
All right. So I'm on the Wikipedia site. What do I do now? Like what? How do I get started with an audit?
Yeah, so one of the so basically the first step in wcag-em is to define a scope. So there's a lot of pages on Wikipedia. Actually, that's a nice example. Lots of websites have this problem that they might have like thousands of pages. I don't know how many Wikipedia has. It says there, I think it's like 6 million plus. That's a lot of pages. We're not going to be looking at all of those pages today. That would be really hard. So what wcag-em does is to say, if you look at a sample within this website, you can maybe find 10 to 20 different pages that are representative for this website, and then look at those.
Okay.
Before we do that, though, we need to kind of set up some metadata. So the tool has a step for that. So basically, you press the Start New Report button, and then it takes you to the first page where you can fill in some information about this website. So that's Wikipedia. And then the scope of the website, it could be something like all pages on wikipedia.org. That's a very broad scope, but it's basically what are you claiming to have a report about? Like what is this report talk about? And usually it's the root like URL for some website. Sometimes it will be things like accept the German Wikipedia, or have some exceptions there. Like if you link out to other pages and you want to make that explicit. Cool. So yeah, just the fictional thing that we're doing here. And then in the next step, you can pick your version of WCAG. So in 2008, we got WCAG 2.0. More recently, we got 2.1. 2.2 is coming. I usually just pick 2.1 as it's like the latest version. And then WCAG is separated into different levels. So we can also choose what we want to do there, if we want to check just the level A ones or double A or triple A. I usually go for double A, just because that's what most organizations are looking for, and also what the European laws prescribe. Sometimes I've heard people look at just the single A issues to kind of, make it easier or something to do a report, because there's less checkpoints and maybe it's a start or something for them. But yeah, let's pick double A today as a performance target.
Okay.
And then we'll need to set a baseline. And what that means in terms of wcag-em is that we want to say, what are we going to claim is supported? So what we could do is say, we only want to claim that this website is accessible on Firefox. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So we probably want to say maybe the latest version of Firefox, Edge, Chrome, Safari, like have a couple of browsers there. And that will be our baseline. So we're basically claiming on these browsers and on these assistive technologies, we want to say that accessibility exists.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll just say, like, I guess with JAWS and voiceover screen readers. Well, we won't be diving into JAWS or voice. We might do some voiceover perhaps, but like just to have something to put in here today.
Yeah, this is what the report claims, and sometimes the client will say, I want to have these versions, or maybe they have an internal system for what browser versions they're trying to support.
Okay.
I know the Dutch government, when they check these reports, they don't like if you say latest version, they want to see version numbers. I personally like latest version because, it makes sense, and I don't see there's a lot of differences in accessibility when it comes to wcag between these versions, because they're all like evergreen browsers at this point. So I've not seen a lot of reports where it was super accessible in Chrome 81 and a lot less in Chrome 80. So yeah, it depends on how detailed you want to get, but you can be detailed there.
Before we move on, I've actually got a question from the chat from Chan, who's asking about the conformance target. For a small company or product, does it make sense to do this in passes? Like maybe you start with an audit for A and then AA and then AAA.
Yeah, it can make sense. I've seen people do it because you do get less checkpoints. But I usually do AA just because once you're auditing, it's easy to find them all, and then you could always like later filter for the single A issues and leave the AA ones for later. I see this partly as a backlog filling exercise. Like some of these things go to the backlog, and it's fine if you don't address them straight away.
Okay.
But it doesn't usually. Yeah, I mean, it takes more time, of course, to find more issues. So yeah, if your budget is small, maybe it can be cheaper to get a single A audit done.
That makes sense. Okay, so yeah, not like because probably developers are going to be working at this, like they're going to be expecting like their backlog to be just loaded up with a bunch of stories. It doesn't make sense to say like, oh, we're going to add half the stories now with this first audit, and then once you're done with that, we'll add the next half. It seems to make more sense just to put them all in and address them all as the team can prioritize.
Yeah, definitely. And it can be like time consuming to get someone in externally to do the audits, like with recurring departments or whatever. So yeah, it's usually best bang for your buck to kind of go for AA there.
Makes sense. Okay, and then do you tend to put anything in the additional requirements?
Yeah, that's basically for if the website owner has requested, like, I would also like to put some extra information in here, or I want you to focus on something specific, or there's some use cases I want to be listed in this report. I usually leave it empty, but that's great. Yeah, you can put some information like focus on right side info box. Yeah, that makes sense. And then anyone reading the report will know, all right, these were the requirements when we started out.
For sure. And so this might be a great way to encode, like if you just added a new feature, right? Like that's probably going to be the highest priority stuff instead of retreading the features that have been in production for a while. So
yeah,
it's still a general audit, but like the audit's really focusing on the newest bits.
Yeah, but then you'd also need to update the target at the top, because we've got like all of Wikipedia. And that's where that kind of comes in. So in the scope of the website, if you're saying all pages, then the report has to be about all pages. However daunting that is, because 6 million pages in Wikipedia is a lot, but we'll get to that because we'll be finding a sample for that.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, I will probably remove this and like, yeah, we'll just say like generally like articles, I guess, all articles in the homepage.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What
Awesome.
now?
Then we've got our first step and we've set up our evaluation. And on the right, you can see that we've now got a report for Wikipedia um,
Okay.
with some parts of WCAG listed there. So yeah, I think we could go to the next step, and that's about exploring the website. So figuring out what's on the website and listing some of that. Now this step is in wcag-em. When I do audits, I don't tend to see a lot of differences here because this is often not about your latest framework. It's often about the core technologies that websites are built with. And I don't see a lot of websites that don't use HTML or CSS or JavaScript for that matter. So usually I'll end up like checking all of them because these technologies exist in most of the pages. If you have very specific things, like sometimes you might have a website that is built in XHTML and that is important to that particular place, or yeah, there might be some exceptions there. And usually when you're performing an audit, you will have heard that from the person kind of commissioning the audit.
Makes sense. All right. And then optional exploration notes. This looks like it's for us more than for the final product. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. If I work alone and my leaf is empty, it happens that these audits get like shared between different auditors, and then it could be helpful. Like, look out for that weird contact page because it's got a form that doesn't make sense or whatever. You could have some information there, but it's for just maybe some other auditors.
Okay. Makes sense. And then maybe in here I'll put like homepage and then like article, I think are probably the two main page types we'd be interested in for Wikipedia.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so these are our own notes, and that's great. Like we can look at those later on. They won't show up in the report, but they are nice to have.
Okay.
And I think if there's no questions, we could probably move on to the third step, which is us trying to find out what our sample looks like. And this is one of our important steps, I think. Because what we're trying to do here is making that jump from the 6 million pages that Wikipedia has to something that we could actually go and audit.
Yeah.
So what I usually try and do is like figure out what sort of templates exist in a website and figure out like how many different pages exist. So we've got this home page, and we've got like individual article pages.
There's like this page as well. Oh geez. Sorry, Wikipedia. Another time perhaps. And yeah.
It's cool though, like there's a bunch of things that pop up and then like we could take notes of.
And I think there's even an article about like web accessibility that could be nice and meta to use. There's no like images here though, so maybe I'll do one that would have a lot of images or something like that.
And use the one for assistive technologies. I think that has some pictures.
Oh, you're right. Oh, you're right. That's good. Very meta. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah, so what we want to find out is like we want to be sure that we've covered the whole website without actually looking at every individual page.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to select a bunch of pages, and I mentioned before, like I usually have between 10 and 20 pages. It depends a bit on who is doing audits. Like I know some companies have like internal standards for that, like they'll have a minimum of 20, or sometimes a client might even say, I want to have at least so many pages checked. And it depends on a lot of factors, like how big is your website, how old is it, is there a lot of complexity, is there even differences between pages, like there might be here, like we have assistive technology, which has a picture, but we had web accessibility that didn't have a picture. So yeah, there are those kind of differences too between different pages.
Okay.
So we're trying to have a good sample here.
Yeah, and if we had, someone from Wikimedia on the call, right, they might be able to tell us more about like what some of those templates are.
Yeah.
Here, sorry, I've just noticed that says or accessibility, and I've legitimately never heard that. Have you?
I think that might be a. Oh. I was gonna say, is this a character encoding thing? But it's not.
No,
That's interesting.
it's
I don't think I've heard that either.
I've just
Maybe folks in the chat have.
sorry, I'm rebranding y'all. I don't do web accessibility. I'm accessibility. I'm like web 1.0, Okay,
Ahead
but
of the curve.
you what?
You're ahead of the curve.
Ahead of the curve, yeah. I feel like the E prefix is very 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Arfig, welcome. Good to have you here. Yeah, so I think, do we know of any other, like, types of... Actually, you know what? I'm gonna pull up one last kind of article that I'm gonna say is probably meaningful, and that is the list of lists. So because
Yeah, great.
Wikipedia has tons of like lists of lists, and also yeah, it has tons of lists. It has tons of lists of lists, and this is its list of lists of lists.
Amazing. I didn't know about this page, but I will be bookmarking it. That
So
looks
good.
great. And it's a good example of like, yeah, different types of content that we might encounter. What might be good too is look at that left-hand sidebar to see if there's anything going on there.
Yeah.
Like any weird pages that we didn't expect.
Let's see. Contribute. Here's help. Let's see. Okay, so we've got portals. Who knows? Maybe this could be something interesting as well. Looks like we've got some like form stuff going on here.
Yeah.
For instance, it does not seem like this label is associated with the input. So yeah, maybe we'll include this
Well,
help page as well.
yeah. This happens when I'm in this phase, like trying to figure out what pages exist. I'm like, I'm gonna click this label and see if it works.
Mhm.
Do my first, take mental notes or sometimes physical notes on paper.
All right, so I think we've got maybe a few different pages. Again, if we were actually doing this on behalf of Wikipedia, we would probably get a much larger set of templates to consider.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
at least
totally.
for
Yeah,
today's purposes, I think this is probably representative enough.
yeah, yeah. And so in reality, you would really want to be sure, have I covered all of the different types of pages? This makes sense. Yeah, we will go for this at this point. So we have two steps in step 3 in our application.
Okay.
And in the methodology. So the steps that we see here are in that specification as well. This is just a nicer way, an interactive way to deal with them. So there's there's the different steps there, and they have explanation of like what exactly you're looking for.
Okay.
And I think there are links as well between the tool and the different steps that exist.
Good. Okay. So yeah, so
So basically, we have the two headings there. One is structured sample, and the other is randomly selected. And you want to have 10% extra pages that are randomly selected. So if you have like 15 or let's say 16 in your structured sample, then you want to have 1.6 randomly selected. Go for 2. So yeah, you want to have some randomly selected pages too. But that's fine. We can just press add web page and let's start to add the ones that we've just kind of found.
are we picking the structured ones? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll say this is homepage. This will be here, the core, like apexwikipedia.org. And then Losing my tabs here. Okay. And then there's like specifically the English homepage, which should be the same thing, only en.wikipedia.org. We'll say we've got an article without images. And this will be, oh, actually, it is a different link here. So, and then article with images. Sorry, I've received a super secret note from Hidde in our chat. Good to know. Thank you. Basically, just don't refresh the auditing tool, otherwise we'll lose our progress.
It's just great, and these short names you will be using later. So yeah, it's great to give them some descriptions.
Okay.
Awesome.
Almost done. All right. Cool. What next then? Now that we've got all these in.
Yeah, so now you have a bunch of pages that we can check for. You'll see that underneath there is this other section called randomly selected sample.
Okay.
So now it's telling you actually you'll need one randomly selected page. I don't know if Wikipedia has a random button, but like yeah, officially you need to find like a yeah, this is a literal random page.
Okay. Works out well.
I don't always know for sure what to do with this step. Like yeah, I'll find like a random thing. You can use a tool for it too,
Okay.
or like blindfolded picking. Cool. So we've got a sample. We've got a randomly selected sample, which is 10% of the regular. Like how many you have in your regular, 10% of that. So now we have a sample, and the next step is kind of the meat of our audit. This is where we are going to be doing the actual auditing.
Okay.
So that's yeah, that's the next step.
All right. Okay. I see some WCAG success criteria here.
Yeah. So yeah, for those who have worked with WCAG before, this will come in familiar. So you will see each of the different success criteria listed here. Some other things that you see here at the top, you can import data from automated tests, and the goal there is to have things like if you have run X on your website, you could potentially import that data. At the moment, I don't know of any tools that provide this data in exactly the way that it is needed here. So I was still a bit unsure at the launch of this tool, but that's very much yeah, a feature that is gonna come in really handy in the future. So you could have something that populates this page somewhat automatically. On the left, you'll see there's a bunch of WCAG versions there. So you can say I only want to audit for the stuff that's added in WCAG 2.1 or something like that. But yeah, usually I'll just keep that to 2.1 because I want to audit everything.
Makes sense.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then performance level, yeah, that's the same. Like you can uncheck and check that. And then underneath that, you can actually say, these are the pages I want to add specific results about. And not everyone uses that, but you can. Yeah, so when you check homepage, it will show up underneath, and then you can have results specifically for homepage. According to WCAG, you don't have to do that. So for like 111, you can say this whole website fails 111 if you find one image that it doesn't conform. You just say it's filled, and that's it. But if you want to be more helpful, you could actually add results for specific pages and say, this happens on the homepage, or like even add a description for that.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I feel like that would be a lot more actionable, and I understand the guidance of like if you fail even once on the website like violates this, right? But like especially when you
Yeah.
got something like Wikipedia, which is so large and so community contributed, like I don't know, I feel like that would be a hard pill to swallow to be like, yeah, well, I found one article where an image doesn't have alt text, therefore the whole website is, you know, like
Yeah.
non-compliant.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the difficult thing with WCAG, I guess. Like this is the characteristic of like how these WCAG audits works. So yeah, if you do find one problem, the whole thing fails that thing. And with that, like if at least one of the criteria have the status of failed, then the whole website has failed. Um, I always try to make sure the wording is not like that. Like
Yeah.
yes, the official outcome is called failed, but yeah, I'll be nice to the team because, yeah, if you have only one problem on your whole site, that's great. Then you're probably doing better in my blog. Like I'll have problems there. We all have accessibility problems. It's an ongoing thing. But yeah, for the purposes of this, yeah, if there's one fail, yeah, you can be more helpful by sort of having results for different pages and explaining kind of clearly what's happening.
See real quick if there actually is. I think we said earlier when we looked at this that this was actually like a background image, right? The big old
Yeah, the
Wikipedia
logo in the
logo.
article page was a background image. Maybe this one is too.
Yeah, I'm actually having trouble finding the image itself. It might be in one of these, but I think yeah. Well, no, hang on. Okay, but you
It's
you
sort
did.
of hidden away there.
Yeah, it's
Like,
difficult to find like the actual image, but given I can't like click or drag it anywhere, I think it is like just a background image, I think. So
yeah,
let's say for the sake of this audit that we have determined it is a background image and therefore it's not been described. Um, we would probably put that in right here, right?
yeah. You would be typing that there pretty much. Yeah.
Wikipedia logo. How would you word it? Like just does not have like a text alternative.
Yeah, that's I think that's great. What I sometimes do is have separate between problem and then solution. So like
Okay.
I might add headings and something that isn't visible here, but it is true. You can put in markdown too. So you could have
Oh,
like markdown heading there, and that will show up in the report later on as HTML.
gotcha. Very cool. Okay. And, okay. And I mean,
Yeah,
presumably Wikipedia
nice.
has looked at that and gone, "Hey, we've got valid reasons why we don't feel like we need to expose this." But like
Yeah,
in this case, for the purposes of today, we're saying that this is an issue that would need to be
yeah.
reported.
And then that shows up in the report later on. So, oh, and one thing we also need to do is on the left there's it says outcome, and for outcome we'll need to select failed, which is harsh wording, but that's what it's called in the standard, and yeah, what we'll
Okay.
have to call it.
Good deal. Anything else more you want to show off in this page in the audit sample page?
Um, I think this is great. So yeah, this is basically what we have here. One thing you could can also find for each of the success criteria is the links to understanding documents and the how to meet documents. So they can kind of help you, and that is kind of going to a version of WCAG called a quick reference. So these are all links like that bring you back to the standard and help you find out, what is one-to-one about, how am I supposed to even audit for this? It will list like information like these, if you do it in this way, then it is sufficient to meet WCAG. If it is done in this way, it's a failure. So these are listed in understanding documents. I think somewhat more to the bottom of this. Yeah, there's a list of sufficient techniques and failures as well.
Okay.
So yeah, these can kind of help you figure out how to assess the issue. One thing to note about these documents, the understanding documents, is that they are not part of the standard. So they are not advisory. They don't have. They are not compulsory. They don't have any status like the WCAG specification does. So WCAG is the normative standard, and all of this information here is advisory or non-normative, as they call it, which means it's not required. It's just suggestions for how to interpret WCAG. It's not WCAG itself. So that's a bit of a caveat with those documents, but they can still be quite helpful if you're auditing and just want to know, like, if someone is doing this, is that okay for this particular part?
Makes sense. Okay. Cool. So yeah, tons of ways to figure out more as to like, does this actually pass or fail the requirement as it's set forth? Okay.
Definitely, yeah. And then you can also view it in the report that is generated. So there's, with each of these criteria, there is a link called View in Report, and that will take you to the report and show that particular result.
Is it safe to just click this, or should I open this in a new tab, or?
Should be safe to just click it, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Oh,
so that
okay,
takes you to what that looks like in the report. So yeah, you can see your previous entered markdown shows up in a massive table.
Nice. Okay. Very cool. Good to know. And it looks like I could go back through and just edit if I realize like I missed something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
and this is something I do a lot. Like I go back and forth between these tools. So between the report and the reporter, so to say. So yeah, that's nice. I think one thing that we haven't done is check the entire sample result.
Okay.
This is a kind of technically WCAG type of thing. So we also will need to set the entire sample to be filled rather than not checked.
Oh, I see. And do that here is what you mean.
Yeah, so you can, if you press the edit button, it will go back, and then yeah, you can check it there.
Okay.
And then it's officially counted as something that has failed. And you'll see those numbers also update. So it says 0 things have passed and 1 of them has failed at the top. And then there's 49 to go within our current kind of performance target. So in AA WCAG 2.1, there's 50 criteria to check in total.
Makes sense. Okay. And so obviously like we're not going through and like updating all of these today, but yeah, so say, I go through, I say like this one's passed, like they're all like the rest of them are all passed. Then what?
Yeah, then so ultimately you probably want to set a status for each of them, and then in your report you'll have information like that you can present to a client and say, yeah, these are you've missed 2 out of 50, and this is how to solve it. So you can present them with a report. And you'll notice, like in the sidebar, it also updates like what your status is.
Oh, I see.
That's mostly helpful. Also, if you have like import or something from somewhere else, you can see in that box kind of how far they've gotten with their outcomes. So what we can do now is maybe go to the next page and fill out the last kind of details about this report.
Okay. And report findings. Okay.
Yeah. So this is kind of another page with some meta information, like, what you want to call this report. You'll see that show up by default. I think it just says report, and you can write something like accessibility of wikipedia.org.
Okay. Then evaluation
Um,
commissioner. Is that who is the
it's our
commissioner?
Twitch community or something. Yeah.
All right.
So the kind of the person who pays for the audit or yeah wanted this audit to be done, and
Oh,
then
gotcha.
evaluators yourself.
That's me.
Yeah, cool. Well, the date is today. That has happened, and then people usually write like an executive summary, like, "Oh, this was really bad," or "You've done amazing, good job." It's yeah. I see that it depends a lot, like on organization, how much information they put there. Um, and I think this is another field that it might show up in the report, but yeah, can probably leave it empty.
Okay.
And with that, we have created a report, uh, and yeah, we can view that in view report. So that's the page we've seen earlier. It has all of our meta information, and then for each of the different criteria, it's got the information and kind of yeah whatever we've written about them. And these can get really long in some cases, and sometimes they get really short too. So it really depends on who the auditor is. Um, I have heard in the Dutch government they sometimes get reports that have gone through none of the criteria, so they just say everything is passed or like even not checked. And there are reports where people write observations for every single thing, and they're really long. So yeah, there's a lot of variety there.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I noticed up top we had some links to where I could like download the report. So this right here, this is the file that I would send to whoever like commissioned it. Ooh, love those description list elements there.
Yeah, it's super plain HTML, so that you can kind of do whatever you want to do with it.
Okay.
And like add style sheets, we find a lot of auditing companies just processes in their own systems, either by writing CSS for this file, or there is the JSON export that people use to like do their whole own thing in the order they like and all of that.
Yeah. So is it opening Firefox for that? Oh, it's opening Firefox for that.
I love the JSON viewer in Firefox.
Here we are. Ooh, does it?
It's a bit hairy, like there's a lot of JSON there, so
Oh, there
maybe
we
it
go.
needs to parse it. Yeah. So what this is the format I mentioned earlier. It's JSON linked data. So there is a bit of like meta information along with the actual data. So it explains what everything is and has like a schema type of thing there. And it will have your actual data. And the great thing about this format is that you can import and export it in various places
Okay.
that support this format. So this is actually another standard for the URL accessibility standard. I will put a link in the chat actually.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and so I could start to see myself using this, like maybe even having in this world of DevOps and automated pipelines, like having something that like parses through this and surfaces it in some way as well. Yeah, I could see some use cases there. Yeah,
Yeah.
let me drop that.
And there's actually some talk in Europe about like exchanging these. So there are some government organizations are asking for these files rather than HTML files, and that has to do with that. What I mentioned earlier, like people like to compare these reports if they are monitoring lots of reports, like in a country or even like in an area like the European Union and trying to compare these things. So it's not used a lot just yet, but it could be used by lots of different tools that kind of integrate with each other. And I know some of these like automated testing tools are looking at, can we maybe export in this format so that it is more exchangeable, basically.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. All right, so we have built a report. We've gotten it in kind of the exported format that we can now hand around and give to people and demonstrate, like, hey, we did it. Is there anything else more that we want to see with this report while we're on it?
Um, I guess that's about it. Yeah, we can press the edit buttons and see if we want to edit anything there, like the executive summary or anything. Yeah, that can happen like right in place, and you can write a bit more. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then you can export it to HTML or JSON, and yeah, go ahead with it.
Makes sense. And then Hidde, you've demonstrated the official wcag-em report tool, but you've actually built kind of a complementary tool. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. If there's anyone here who likes Eleventy, um, they can also use this alternative tool that I've built, which is like a starter pack for Eleventy that allows you to create performance reports a little bit like this. It assumes the same metadata, so you'll need to put in things like an evaluation commissioner and other sorts of things because they are from that wcag-em standard. So you'll find like the same kind of, oh, you need a target and that sort of thing. But I've kind of swapped things around. So where the official tool is standard first, this is kind of issue first. So you're putting in issues, and then the standard is kind of metadata to those issues.
Okay.
So if you have an issue like this one that we're looking at, the main menu doesn't work with keyboard, the wcag criterion 211 is metadata to that issue rather than in the official tool where the keyword problem in the main menu is kind of metadata of
Yeah.
211.
The main
Swapping it around, making it more readable, maybe.
Yeah, the main tool, the wcag-em like official tool, is gonna tell you, hey, you broke success criterion 2.1.1, and here's how you did that. And then this tool is
Yeah.
like, here's an actual usability experience. Oh, by the way, this breaks 2.1.1.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. I find it works well with clients who want to fix their problems. So who are very much focused on that. There are others who are more focused on conformance. So they are looking at like, am I legally doing the actual minimum? And this is more for like, what are my issues? I was looking at, can I like build an export from this to like Jira or other places? That just takes this data because this is JSON or it's markdown files with some what's that prompt matter that has the metadata.
Gotcha. Very cool. So if Eleventy is your speed, or if you want to surface this information in a way that's more focused around the issues, absolutely take a look at Hidde's Eleventy tool, which I've linked in the chat. That's awesome. Is there anything more you'd like to make sure we get in before we wrap up?
No, if there's any questions though for people watching this, I can imagine it's a lot of information. Yeah, open for any of that. I think we've covered sort of how to create a report officially. This is also official, but it swaps things around. So yeah, it's another way to try.
Good deal. Yeah, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and start promoting a few links. We've had Hidde on. You can follow Hidde at HDV on Twitter. You should also be reading Hidde's blog. It is fantastic. You could also get to it with hidde.blog, which I love as a domain. That's brilliant. And yeah, do you have anything else you wanted to promote, Hidde?
Oh yeah, one thing, I'm speaking at this accessibility conference tomorrow, which is called Tech Alley Summit. It is free to attend, and I think at least some of it should be US friendly too. And yeah, it's got lots of people talking about accessibility tooling and things to improve accessibility. So yeah, join us if you wanna know more about that.
All right. Yeah, we actually do have a question, which is you would go through all the criteria manually, right?
Yes. I do also run automated tests, and then I found the problem is that those tests have manually. I mentioned before that there is this import thing that exists, but the way that currently works is that it isn't as helpful as a manual thing would be. Just because like if you find the same issue in many different places, it might show up as a lot of different entries, whereas manually you might think, all right, the logo is broken on every page, and I'm just gonna file that once because it's easier to explain that way. So that's something I find useful to kind of use the automated tests, but then aggregate them in my head and then put them into the system that way.
Makes a lot of sense to me. All right. Yeah, so with that, Hidde, thank you so much for being on. Chat, I want to tell you about a few things that are coming up over the next week. So first of all, this Friday, I know Nightbot has been dropping up the promotion for this every once in a while, but our good friends over at Front End Horse are doing a 4-hour long charity live stream. We're getting some excellent people together to just talk about web dev and donate to Team Seas, which is cleaning up the oceans. You should absolutely be there. Alex, if you're still around, please drop the link to your channel there, and as well as anything else you wanted to share with that. Additionally, next Tuesday, 2 p.m. Central, so same time as this stream, going to be having Chance Strickland on. We're going to be going through Remix. So if you haven't had a chance to play around with Remix quite yet, we're going to be building a project management tool. So that's going to be a ton of fun. And if you want to keep apprised of all of the great things going on with Semantics, you should go follow Semantics on Twitter at SemanticsDev. So yeah, y'all, I'm going to figure out someone to raid. Hidde, thank you again so much for being here. This has been a fantastic time, and I'm so happy to have had a chance to get you on. Bye, y'all.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.